We're here to solve this Skyscrapers Cipher puzzle by JinHoo Ahn. It's themed around compass directions. It uses 6 unique letters, W-E-S-T from west, and then adding in the A and the N from part of the word east and from north. That means we're going to have all the digits 1 through 6 as outside clues here. The two extremes, 1s and 6s, are the most limiting. You can't have an N that has the values of 1 because of reasons like this. They also couldn't have the values of 6 because then they'll be the same actual entries and end in the same terminus. Same claims you can make for the S's and for the T's. You can't have them both sort of be 1s or both be 6s, so these values have to be somewhere in the middle. That means that the 1 and the 6 are going to be across W, E, and A. And if E is equal to 6, then each of this runs is going to finish with a 6 in front of an A clue and a 6 in front of a W clue, and they would both be equal to 1s. So the 6 is in front of W or A. That's a way we can kind of do the eliminations. And whichever one that's in front of, it places a 6 in front of the E, which makes it a 1, and both E's have to have the same effect. So whichever it is, it now forces E to be 1, and we can work forward from here. Now let's look at these two rows, which have S's on both sides and T's on both sides. If a 6 is in this cell or this cell, the S has to be 2 or 3. It's bounded from the left. If a 6 is in one of these cells, the S from the right now limits this to be 2 or 3. And the same logic is true for the T that's just beneath it. Again, it's surrounded on left and right by those clues. So S and T are a 2-3 pair in order like this. And that means the remaining letters are 4, 5, 6. Again, 6 is one of A or W, so this top clue of this N is only 4, 5. A few things we can do with this. One of the first things we can do is, I guess, mark 6s in one of these two cells because of the constraints from the top and from the bottom of where those clues go. A different and probably more important constraint will be starting to recognize we can't put very big digits, 4 or 5, near these 4, 5 clues. And these will get more constrained as we actually know which of these are 4, 5, or 6. But as a starting point, we're going to have some spaces where big digits are pretty bad. Even one digit in, this is often a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Off of this clue, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and this would also be 1, 2, 3, 4. So recognize a 5 is impossible in this cell, this cell, this cell, or this cell, based on the big clues around it. So a first digit to place after these two we already have in the grid is this 5. It's the only place a 5 can go in this row based on these clues around it. We now are going to have a set of far more subtle and challenging deductions, but ones that will break into the puzzle, and it will still be focused on the digit 5. And it will be tied to a couple joining constraints. I think the first is a cell like this. Notice if this cell is a 5, it now forces the A to the right to be a 4, because we could see a maximum of 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings. And it forces the N above to be a 4, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings. And so this is ruled out because A and N have to have different values. So this is, again, a 1, 2, 3, 4 cell. And a 5 is over here. And you can say, well, that's not really showing me a lot. I still have a lot of choices to go, and that's true. But there's one more really subtle deduction, and this is the one that, at least in my first solve, took me some staring to get, but it's a key thing to think through the logic here. And it actually steps back to recognizing a trait about these rows that have the same bounds on both sides. And it doesn't matter which one I talk about to show you this concept, but one of these clues, either the S or the T, is going to have 2's on both sides. And in a row that has 2's on both sides, there's no place you can put a 5 in the middle. Literally, you can't put in this cell, but say you used any of these 3 positions. What that would now mean is that on one side, we have a digit that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And wherever I put the 6, I can hide the 5 from one direction. So in this case, this T sees a building and the 6 and doesn't see this 5. But on the other direction, we see a small building, we see a 5, and then we see a 6. So you can't hide a 5 twice. And that 5 is 1 smaller than the largest building means you'd always see an extra building in this row that's in an interior cell. And so whichever of S or T is 2, that row has to have the 5 on the extremes. And so somewhere, we don't know where, either there's a 5 in front of this and this when S is 2, or there's a 5 in front of this or this when T is 2. And the reason this matters is that one of the positions left for a 5, exactly this cell I have highlighted right now, forces an immediate contradiction within the grid, but one that's very subtle to see. If this is a 5, that means the cell below it is a 6, which means S becomes a 2, which means this row now has a lot of 2 surrounding it, and there's no way to complete that 4th row. And again, this is super, super subtle, but it is what I found on the logical path is a very forcing constraint. There is no 5 in the cell. The 5 is below, and that means in this column, the 5 is always hidden behind the 6. And so this now will set up a whole set of deductions that are now far easier, but get us through to the solve. For instance, this clue here cannot be a 4. If this is a 4, this n above it sees 1, 2, 3 buildings, because again, the 5 is hidden behind the 6. And so we can eliminate this as a 4. If this can't be a 4, then this row can't be 1 through 6. It has to be the 4, 5 clue, and this is now the only row that can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in order. That now eliminates these as 1 and 2. It eliminates this as being a 4, and so this row now only has this option for a 4. We do now come back to this clue. After we've placed this 4, this sees 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings, so W is 4 and N is 5. And we know those clues for sure. If N is 5, this sees 1, 2, 3, the building 4, and then 6. Again, remember 5 is hidden, so this is how this completes. And S is now known for sure to be 2, and T is known for sure to be 3, and there will be a 5 on the extremes somewhere in this row. This N still sees 5 coming down, and it can't start with a 1, so it must see 2, it must see 3, it must see 4, it sees a 5, and then it sees 6. And 1 is hidden here, but again, in this row, the 5 is on the left or right side, so 5 is in the cell, 1 is in the cell. 5 is in the cell, so we get this being placed in the grid. This clue we can write as larger than the cell to the left. This clue over here, which can only be 2 or 3, needs to have a larger value next to it, which is 3 or 4. Again, the 1 up above is given there, so you get one thing like this cell has to be a 1. I think the most forcing probably place left is to look at the digit 6. So 6 needs to go in either this lower left upper right cell or this upper left lower right cell, but this 2 clue is going to cause some issues. If the 6 is behind the 5, it's going to be seen, so the 6 has to be below. And marking that in, we get the 6 and the 6 placed. That means this 4 has to be hidden, which means a 5 has to be right in front of it. That now means we can finish this row. The 3 is the only option left for that cell. A 2 goes in here. The cell has to be a 1, so we actually have 3, 4 left. This is a 4. This is a 3. This is a 2. This is a 1. We have 2 and 3 to place in this column. We have 3 and 4 to place in this column. And we have 5 and 4 to place in this column, which are all Latin square constraints. And so having marked all the letter cells and marked the interior cells, we've got a valid grid and the solution confirmed. So hopefully you got something through this walkthrough. This is a very challenging puzzle. It was also incredibly elegant, though, from the compass theme to get sort of a starting point with where the 1s go, this constraint with the 2 3s around the STs, and then eventually this walk down this column about where 5s can't go. That was the break-in I found to get through the puzzle. It eventually got us this is the full 6, this is the value of 4, and everything else is shown in the video. So sometimes the subtle things in Skyscrapers become key, and in this case, a surrounded row that has 2 2s on each side is a key constraint to recognize you can't put the second from largest building, in this case a 5, into that row. So always keep that in your back pocket. If you ever see that kind of clue pattern, you're always going to be placing a 5 on one of those extremes, or if this were a larger puzzle like a 7x7, placing a 6 in one of those cells. Something like that. That's a key takeaway that you'll be able to use in challenges like this and challenges in the future. So hope you got something from seeing me solve the Skyscrapers puzzle, and we'll see you again soon.